This housing market, I always knew that improving it would make a big difference. And the longer I've worked in the housing market, the more I realized that almost everything in society is affected by people's housing and housing costs and cost of living more than anything else. And the deeper and the further I looked, it even goes so far as to say that it massively impacts the entire economy. I mean, almost the entire economy in terms of the way that the housing market locks up capital that can't be deployed in more productive ways. It locks up people's spending power, and it leads to, severe housing crises and homelessness, all because the housing market doesn't function properly. And I am working on an extensive point by point list of all the reasons why fix housing, fix everything is really very true. I mean, you're talking about, I'll just pick some random examples. Domestic violence, a lot of that comes down to the fact that couples can't move on, can't move out. You've got a lot of very unfortunate, horrific statistics on suicide, and about 1/3 of all suicide is debt related. And of the debt related suicides, either rent or mortgage arrears is usually the number one item on the list for those people. So it's life and death stuff. I'm not joking. Child poverty, children's chances, kids being, basically unavoidably sucked down the wrong path in life because of their housing situation being not what any parent would want it to be. And that's before we even get into, what it means for the local economy when people can't go out and spend because all of their money is being completely vacuumed up by their rent, by their mortgage payment, by their energy bills, etc. So, it may not fix absolutely everything, but in terms of the country's largest social problems, it makes a huge impact, positive impact on almost all of them.
And Charlie, you made me think of a colleague, an old colleague in journalism that used to say, not having anywhere to put down roots, that home thing, an absence of that is just bad for the soul. He always used to say that, maintain that.
Absolutely, 100%. And the UK government published a document just in the last few months, I think it was the end of last year, where they're saying that social mobility is at its lowest in 50 years. So they have actual measures of social mobility, and it's at its lowest. And it's no coincidence, John, that social mobility being its lowest for 50 years coincides with how long it takes to move house being at its longest pretty much ever. So there's a direct correlation, not necessarily a causation, but a correlation between how difficult it is to move home. And I'm not talking about how expensive it is. That's a separate part, right? That's another problem all of its own. I'm talking about just even for people who can afford to move home, how difficult it is to move home. That is directly correlated with how much social mobility is improving or deteriorating. And it's horrible. You got every day, every week, every month, you've got new kids being born into a society where their prospects at the moment continue to get bleaker and bleaker from a social economic point of view. And honestly, without getting into lots of boring detail, you unlock housing mobility. And by that, I just mean the ability for people to move house when they need to. Not necessarily up, not necessarily down, but just being able to move when your life would benefit from being able to move location, whether it's moving out of your parents just because you need to get out of your parents' house, right? Never mind the money, and everybody wants that. Or whether you are an elderly widow or widower in a large house who would love to move house and downsize, but honestly, never even putting to one side the monstrous stamp duty cost of doing that. It's too difficult. And you as an old person going to the market and saying, hey, I'd like an estate agent to my house. I mean, those poor people are amongst the most exploited and abused by the agents. And so, we have a housing market that is barely functioning. And if you were to simply extrapolate the volume of moves per person that we had in 2006 and extrapolate that in line with the population growth to where we are now, we would have twice as many housing transactions a year, double. Now, you say that to the industry, and the industry are all fighting each other over stock and listings. It is the industry's fault, with the government a very, very close second, that they aren't making twice as much money as they could be. I mean, they could literally be making twice as much money. And part of my crusade is to get estate agents to understand that they make money when they sell a house, not when they list it.
I know you're probably loath, Charlie, to cut the poorer estate agents some slack, but let's just set them to one side for a moment. Do you think there's anything in this that, that, to use your phrase, the housing market barely functioning is often down to greedy vendors? So the person that's sat in their house that's about to go on the market, they know houses around the area of that same style and ilk have been selling for, say, 350 grand. But do you know what? I want 450 for mine.
Well, vendor greed is the excuse agents use for overvaluing. I've heard every single agent. I mean, I've even sat down with the former chief executive and the founding chairman of two of the biggest property companies in this country ever, and discussed with him the effects of his businesses on overvaluing. And he just went, "Oh no, it's just vendor greed." I was gobsmacked. I was absolutely gobsmacked. Now, is it true that you get a segment of sellers like the ones you just described, who don't understand economics, who don't understand the funding of the housing market, who don't understand the function of the housing market, who just go, well, if we could get that, we'd sell. And they've done no research and they're being utter dimwits about it. Yes, there are those people, and any self-respecting estate agent would not list their home.
Okay, so vendor greed in a way gets a pass from you, should we say, at this point. And stamp duty, I mean, let's bookmark that, because I do need to want to come to stamp duty shortly in this conversation. But politicians, Charlie, why? How long have we got? Why are politicians so bad at this stuff, at the housing stuff?
Well, it's not just politicians that are bad. So this is the, I mean, the answer to the question is because they don't understand how the housing market functions at the coalface. They don't get it. Neither does anybody else that's never worked in the industry, and neither do most of the estate agents themselves in the industry. Now, that's a very bold statement from someone who's never been an estate agent, but I have worked with literally thousands of them over the last 25 years. And even the good agents, and by that I mean people who get their sellers' houses sold in a good time frame and at a good price, even those guys, they just put it down to saying, look, I know my patch. That's it. I don't really understand how the market works. I just know my patch. And so politicians, unfortunately, it comes to the manifestos. I mean, not one single manifesto in my living memory, election manifesto, has passed without every party making promises about what they're going to achieve with housing. So they hang their hat on it, and the most recent government is no exception to this. And they use it to get votes, quite effectively in some cases. But they do so by making promises that they don't understand how to keep. So I don't doubt their intentions. I don't doubt that they would like to fix the housing market. In fact, I'd say Matthew Pennycook is probably the most passionate housing minister I've seen in a very long time, who genuinely would love to, but he doesn't understand it any better than anyone else does. And so he's unfortunately misguided and isn't going to get the changes he wants through, I don't think. And even if he does, it's not going to help. But the worst thing is that there's an enormous amount of evidence that shows over the last 50 years, every time the government intervenes in some way in the housing market, house price to wage ratio gets worse. Now, in other words, literally every time the government pulls a lever in the housing market, housing becomes less affordable on the whole. Every time someone used Help to Buy, a 40% in London or 20% elsewhere, Help to Buy loan, every person who got a house using that left someone else behind who will now not be able to afford a house because of that. And actually, numbers are larger than that. And a lot of those Help to Buy guys are now, unfortunately, it's coming home to roost for them that the house prices just haven't stayed up and they're now in negative equity. 40% Help to Buy people in London with flats are amongst the worst hit of all. So politicians, let's be charitable. Let's assume that they mean well. The housing market is too complex to go, I'm going to wave a magic wand, make a policy, and it's going to fix everything. It's too complicated. It's too complicated. And one more point on vendor greed, John, I missed actually, is that I don't think it's fair to accuse a young family of aspiring to live in a better house. I don't think it's fair to call that greed. I genuinely don't. And so when you've got a family who's not trying to make money from their house, but is trying to see whether or not selling their house gets them into a nicer life for their family, okay, you can't criticize those guys for being optimistic and hopeful and aspirational. That's not greed. Wanting a better life for your family is not greed, but the speculators are greedy, and there are some who are greedy. But the reason that a lot of vendors fall into this trap is because what does the media do on a literally a daily basis? The underlying message from the media, from government, from lenders, from portals is up, record house prices. That's all you ever hear, record. And of course, nominally, house prices, of course they're going, everything, wages are at a record high. Everything's at a record high because inflation does that, right? But nominally a record is meaningless. And actually, for the first time in 50 years, 20-year house price growth adjusted for inflation is now zero. Financial Times reported that using ONS data. 20-year real house price growth in this country is now at zero. So this is why you get vendor greed. And this is, so it's complicated. And it's a difficult thing to understand. The best thing the politicians could do is step back and leave it alone and let the market sort itself out. That is the best thing politicians could do. And scrap stamp duty.
And there are some, I think, the last thing that you or anybody in your position wants to do, Charlie, is obviously, particularly online, is to be met with ambivalence and not to be noticed, your passion and taken no notice of. But obviously, they're always inevitably people that take exception, say, you're talking this down, you're talking that down, and narrow past you as some sort of provocateur, which I personally, I know Simo thinks is ridiculous. But you're very consumer-led, aren't you, Charlie, in the sense that, you've got these templates that house buyers have used. There's lots of case studies. I've seen you post stuff on socials and your content about how things have made a difference. So this stuff is working.
It definitely is working. And the only people who object to my content are the people who are benefiting from the current dishonesty and dysfunction. They're the only people. Now, everyone else goes, hang on a second, this is better. Shorter transaction times, which is all I'm working towards, right? Shorter transaction times is better for buyer, for seller, and for the agent, isn't it, right? Think about it. House prices don't affect estate agents except when they've hung their reputation on a house price prediction. They need to stop doing that. And when they do, they'll sell more houses and they'll make more money and they'll stop being considered by the public to be dishonest. So the people who see me as a provocateur or as an agitator or whatever else are just people who currently rely on the way things are at the moment. But the way things are at the moment has led us to estate agency fees in real terms are 50% lower than 20 years ago. In real terms, 50% lower than 20 years ago. Now, who's going to possibly stand up and argue, no, this is a good way to do business. This is how our industry should work. We're earning less and less and less, and we're selling fewer and fewer houses. So don't change it, Charlie, because we love it like this. Honestly, the writing's all over the wall. And I've just, if I may, I have just yesterday put a video out on both the BestAgent YouTube and the Moving Home Charlie YouTube channels of a live streamed interview with an estate agent that I've been working with for the last 4 months to prove the point, and it proves it so beautifully. It proves the point that if you allow the housing market to operate naturally, everything sells in under 4 weeks. Everything. And that is the proof of concept I needed for, because that's the whole idea of BestAgent, right? The idea of the BestAgent website is to create a national housing marketplace where if you are a sensible, realistic seller and you need to move house, and you are a sensible, realistic buyer and you want to buy a home, you will be able to do so in a fraction of the time on BestAgent. Eventually, that's the goal, right? You'll be so intelligent, forward-thinking people will be able to transact houses. Our goal is 8 weeks from listing to exchange, right? That's total. So now, imagine this. Imagine you decide on the 1st of June, you decide, oh, should we move house? Let's sell our house. And by the end of July, you've sold. That sounds impossible to achieve, but only in the context of the UK market. You look at other countries, that's normal. It's just literally just normal. So all we would be doing is playing catch up with other countries. And that's the goal. And so my goal with BestAgent is that if we unlock the housing market's potential, the pent-up demand for people to move, you will boost liquidity, in other words, transaction volumes and economic activity. You will double it. And roughly speaking, every time someone moves house, they spend £25,000 in the economy. Okay, over and above what they pay for their mortgage and the purchase of the house. It's called what I call collateral spend. Now, with 1 million more people a year spending 25 grand, that's another £25 billion a year into the economy every year. It would lift us on its own out of recession. It would stimulate economic activity, social mobility. It would, I mean, honestly, the benefits are endless and limitless. But 2 things need to happen. Estate agents need to stop overvaluing, and that's my absolute focus at the moment. And the government needs to scrap stamp duty for home movers. Okay, it needs to scrap. I mean, ideally, it should scrap stamp duty on residential transactions completely. And if they want to levy other taxes on overseas buyers or corporate or whatever, that's fine. But stamp duty should go, because it's literally like a handbrake on the housing market, and it's a handbrake on social mobility. And what I proved with the agent I'm working with, and anyone can go and watch this video where they just tell the story of what's happened. So they rang me in January and went, help. We can't win instructions because the big corporates are overvaluing so high that it's so ridiculous we can't even go that high with valuations. And the instructions that we are winning secondhand are still valued so high we can't sell them, and we're drowning. And I started working with them on the 1st of February, which is just under 4 months ago. And in May this month, they've just had their record ever month for sales agreed in terms of fees. And in the time that I've been working with them, and this is not an exaggeration, this can all be verified, since I started working with them, they have sold 100% of the homes they've listed in under 3 weeks. That's sale agreed in under 3 weeks. 100% of what they've listed in under 3 weeks. It's just now, and the way it works is when they go around to someone's house who's thinking of selling, and the person says, so how much can you get for my home? Their answer is, we don't know. And that's quite a jolt for a seller. Sorry, I thought you were a estate agent. What do you mean you don't know? We don't know what your home will sell for, and anyone else who tells you that they do is making it up. And then they can back that up with countless amounts of evidence. Go, look at all these houses on the market with outrageous like yours that have been there for months. And any, you know, so and the seller goes, so the nice thing is, in the seller said, like, okay, so if you're not going to tell me how much you think it's going to sell for, what can you tell me? That's great. Well, let us talk you through the process of how we're now selling 100% of the properties that we list within 3 weeks. Every single one. They have to, and it's the process that I've taught them how to do. And it leads to between 16 to 20 viewings on every house in 2 weeks, and then a week of usually between 5 and 7 offers. And the seller going, you've definitely discovered the market for my home. Thank you very much. I can't argue with that. That's loads of viewings. It's loads of offers. I completely accept that. And there are some people who go, oh, well, they must be selling cheap. No, they've achieved record prices on some of those properties, record price per square foot and record price in the street. So that proves the point that the concept that I've been working for a long time for BestAgent nationally, the concept works. And if I can make that happen nationally, we will unlock housing transactions and everyone can breathe a sigh of relief, including the government.
And the thing is, Charlie, I think it's important to say, just briefly at this stage, that you're in good company with this because you and Kirsty Allsop, no less, are on the same page in that desire to speed up the house buying process. So, I mean, realistically, without a political power base in Westminster, just kind of, can you give us a quick summary of how you achieve it? You know, how can you practically get to a point at which the house buying process is now faster?
Well, as I've already achieved with this estate agent, because the house buying and selling process for them is now faster every single time. And it's sellers being prepared. So they insist that the seller has a conveyancer instructed and the legals are ready. That's a condition of using this estate agent now. They won't sell your house unless you agree to have your legals ready. Okay, so sellers coming prepared. Buyers who want to view and want to offer must also be properly qualified and must demonstrate that they are proceedable buyers, so that they're not wasting time with any buyers who tire kicking, would love to have it, but actually got no chance of getting finance, right? So that they are only dealing with serious sellers, because what kind of seller would instruct a conveyancer if they weren't serious? And they're only dealing with qualified buyers. And what happens is they do once a week open house, first round, second round, offers. It's a process like that, and it's done like clockwork. And so the sellers know where they stand, the buyers know where they stand. The buyers are going, hang on a second, it's only been on the market 2 weeks. What do you mean it's under offer? Yeah, that's us. And they aren't having to ring around and beg for viewings. So, but what Kirsty Allsop is talking about is scrapping stamp duty. So if sellers are prepared and come to the market prepared and move and sell faster, buyers are prepared, agents stop overvaluing, the market can function unfettered. And that's what I mean by natural market. That's all that's happened with this agent I'm working with. They've just allowed the market to function. They've got out of the way and it's functioning. Now, that means that for people who want to adopt this process, so the home sellers coming to BestAgent, looking for an agent that adopts this process, those sellers are going to be able to sell in, my goal is 8 weeks, right? Now, currently it's 20 weeks, I think is the average. So why wouldn't you do that? Buyers, it's the same. You come along, you're properly qualified, you get a better chance of your offer being accepted, as per my free offer template that gets used all the time. It's thousands of times a month that gets used. It's incredible. But ultimately, the dream scenario is that we've proved that housing can function better. I can then go to the government, and I will do this. I will go to Downing Street if I'm allowed, if I get the opportunity, and I will pitch the government and the Treasury and say, if you permanently scrap stamp duty, and it must be permanent, because if anyone even suspects it's temporary, it'll cause a distortion in the housing market. If you permanently, once and for all and forever, scrap stamp duty, you will unlock so much social mobility that the benefits are almost uncountable. And I will say, look, what you lose, which is about £9 billion a year in stamp duty, you will more than make up for in a long list of increased corporation tax take, increased PAYE because of the employment. You know, talk about another 100 to 200,000 jobs being created if you double transaction volumes, right? Think what that does for unemployment. Think what that does for the welfare bill. Think what that does for people having money in their pockets, spending the economy again, VAT, fuel, all these things that the government makes money on. It would very, very quickly, if you were to allow the housing market to return to its natural transaction levels, they would more than make up for what they lose in stamp duty on tax take in other ways, not income, just like increased tax take on VAT, on corporation tax, on PAYE, that kind of stuff. But not only that, the social benefits that would happen from people, the reduction in people being affected in terms of domestic violence because they can't move house, the reduction in homelessness, the reduction in child poverty, the social benefits from all of those kind of things are almost unmeasurable. There would be a tangible, palpable sense of, I think, optimism and uplift if the housing market was allowed to function normally without interference from government or banks. And that's why I say fix housing, you fix everything.
Yeah, but they'll all have your t-shirts soon, Charlie, I'm sure. You put on X, didn't you? I'll paraphrase, but the bottom line was, if you like, the payoff, stamp duty strangles movers. Well, we've obviously heard and read and seen, etc., that you believe vehemently in that. But, you know, for all you said, realistically, do you think this government, a government, will do that, will put it in a bit?
Any government that can be persuaded and convinced using cold hard data that they will make more money and have more voters happier with them by doing this would do this. You've just got to make the case in a way that they just look around each other at the table and go, yeah, well, that's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? And they've got the evidence to back it up. They prove it. So I do think it's doable, genuinely doable. You just got to show them that the incentives are there for everybody. I mean, everybody. There are no losers from this. And for people who say, well, yes, but how do you fund the loss of stamp duty? Again, I can go down that list, and it's a big list of things that would improve the economy. I mean, the improvement in transaction volumes. I mean, the other thing they've also got to do is they've got to stop approving ever longer term mortgages. They've got to stop doing that and allow house prices to settle at a growth rate in line with wages. And the relationship between wages and house prices has got to be a stable one. And then social mobility and the economy will come back to life. Honestly, history will show that the way in which this housing market has been operated in the last 25 years will be one of the prime reasons that the whole economy has been struggling for so long.
Last thing, Charlie, before you go, you've been saying very intriguingly, there's this build-up of momentum for what you're doing, BestAgent, all the stuff around that, because you've been talking about assembling some very, very experienced, powerful, influential people to the table. Can you give us just a bit of a sense of what that is? You know, maybe one or two things that are on the cards that are kind of pushing all this forward.
I can. It's very exciting. If you imagine BestAgent becomes the de facto housing marketplace where people start and complete their housing transactions, and you imagine how powerful and influential that organization becomes, what could go wrong? Two things could go wrong. It could get bought by a corporation and just exploited, and they put the housing market back where it was before by just literally tightening the screws to make money, or it could get distorted by government policies as well. And so I've been assembling a board of non-executive directors. I am right in the middle of that process right now. We had our first actual in-person meeting of them last week. And the purpose of that board will be to protect BestAgent from attempts by other people with nefarious purposes to derail BestAgent. Because ultimately, my intention and my goal is that once it's established, fully established, it becomes immensely valuable. It becomes more valuable than I will never need that. No one will ever need that amount of money. And my ultimate goal is that we turn it into a foundation, a for-profit foundation that exists in perpetuity to serve British society by providing a high-functioning, unfettered housing marketplace. And it fights off the attempts by corporations to just profit gouge and price gouge, and also defends the market from unwise moves by the government. So in order to have, because I'm 53 this year, and at some point I would like to stop working, and I'd like to know that it's going to be in safe hands. And so that's what I'm putting together. And it's an extraordinary, I mean, sitting in the room with these people was a bit like a but a pinch me moment, you know. And in fact, tomorrow morning I've got a meeting with another person who is a world famous person in his field. It's almost a household name, who has accepted my invitation to discuss helping out with BestAgent. And if I can secure that person's involvement, that would be massive, because it's someone who, like me, believes that the housing market, he's not in the housing industry, he's outside, he's but he shares my passion that the housing market could and would be a lot better and serve society better if it could function properly. And so, it's very, very difficult as a guy that's been a sort of struggling prop tech entrepreneur for 25 years to sit in a room with people. I mean, the other people from within the industry, that two of the best known names in the industry, that they're unusual. They're not names people might expect. But in my view, two of the most remarkable change makers in this industry, who I would be utterly proud to be able to announce their joining. And what's exciting is that they are all looking at this goal about fix housing, fix everything, and they're looking at the data. Housing Stig's been helping a lot with that, by the way, help with the data. And at that meeting, I presented a whole load of Housing Stig's data, and all of them were like, "That's extraordinary. That's so powerful. Like the good this could do for society and the industry and individuals and government is immense." So I'm hoping that I'm in the middle of riding the crest of a wave of support that's going to, at some point in the not too distant future, allow me to announce a big lineup of names getting on board with BestAgent to help bring it to the market and to help move people, which is by the way, going to be our strapline. BestAgent, move people. Still there? John, I've lost you. Your mic is on mute, John.
Right. I don't know what that was. I didn't select that, but there you go. It's not mind research. Yeah, I was just saying that, and frankly, great to hear that you've got new names that people were expecting, because who wants established, who wants the same old ideas and names coming around again, sort of full circle. So yeah, cultural shift. Obviously, here's to fix housing, fix everything to BestAgent. Charlie, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, John.
Brilliant. And here's to things being muted when they shouldn't be muted. God knows what happened there. I don't know.